In 1953, a government was overthrown, not by war, not by revolution, but by a decision made thousands of miles away in secret. No public vote, no official declaration, just a carefully planned operation that most people wouldn't even hear about for decades. That one decision didn't just remove a leader, it rewired the future of an entire country. It created anger that would last generations. It triggered a revolution. It led to hostage crisis, economic warfare, assassinations, and nuclear standoffs. And today, more than 70 years later, two nations that were once allies now stand on opposite sides of the most dangerous geopolitical rivalries in the world, the conflict between the United States and Iran. To understand why this conflict exists, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the headlines, not the recent tensions, but the moment trust was broken. In the early 20th century, Iran was one of the most strategically important countries in the world, not because of its military, not because of its economy, but because of what lay beneath its soil: oil. By the 1940s, Iran possessed some of the largest proven oil reserves globally, but there was one critical detail. Iran did not control its own oil. That control belonged largely to a British company, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. The structure of the agreement was deeply unequal. Iran received roughly 16% of the profits, while the vast majority flowed back to Britain. To put that into perspective, by the late 1940s, oil revenues were central to Britain's post-war recovery. Iranian oil wasn't just a resource, it was pillar of British economic survival. Inside Iran, however, the situation looked very different. Despite sitting on immense natural wealth, large parts of the Iranian population lived in poverty. Infrastructure was underdeveloped, economic inequality was widespread, and increasingly the perception grew that foreign powers was extracting wealth while leaving the country behind. This wasn't just an economic issue, it became a question of sovereignty, and that question would soon find a political voice in a man named Mohammad Mossadegh. Mossadegh was not a revolutionary, he was not a dictator, he was a democratically elected prime minister with a nationalist vision. Iran should control its own resources. In 1951, he acted on that vision. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. From a domestic perspective, this move was overwhelmingly popular. It symbolized independence, dignity, and economic justice. But internationally, it triggered a crisis. Britain immediately responded with a series of aggressive measures. Iranian oil was boycotted on the global market. Legal challenges were launched. Economic pressure intensified. The impact was severe. Iran's oil exports, which had previously reached around 2.5 million barrels per day, collapsed to near zero. Government revenues shrank dramatically. The economy began to contract. Inflation rose. Political instability increased. What had started as an assertion of sovereignty was now turning into an economic crisis. And this is where the United States entered the story, not as a direct aggressor at first, but as an observer with growing concerns. In the early 1950s, the world was defined by the Cold War. The United States was not just concerned with economics, it was concerned with ideology. The fear was simple but powerful. If a country became unstable, it might fall under the influence of the Soviet Union. Iran, weakened by economic crisis and political instability, suddenly looked vulnerable. From Washington's perspective, Mossadegh was becoming a risk, not necessarily because he was aligned with the Soviets, but because instability itself could create an opening. At the same time, Britain was lobbying aggressively for intervention. It had lost control of Iranian oil and wanted it back. These two interests, British economic concerns and American geopolitical fears, aligned. The result was one of the most significant covert operations of the 20th century, the 1953 Iranian coup. The operation, orchestrated by the CIA and British intelligence, was known as Operation Ajax. Its execution was not based on military invasion, but on manipulation. Money was used to influence media narratives, journalists were paid to publish anti-government stories, politicians were bribed, protests were organized and amplified to create appearance of widespread unrest. Even criminal elements were reportedly mobilized to escalate chaos on the streets. The goal was not just to remove Mossadegh, but to create a situation where his removal appeared inevitable, and it worked. In August 1953, Mossadegh was overthrown. He was arrested and later placed under house arrest for the rest of his life. In his place, the monarchy was restored under Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. From the perspective of the United States and Britain, the operation was a success. Iran was once again aligned with Western interests. Oil access was restored under new agreements. But from the perspective of many Iranians, something far more significant had happened. A democratically elected leader had been removed by foreign powers. This wasn't just a political interference, it was seen as a violation of national sovereignty, and more importantly, it created a narrative that would persist for decades, that the United States was willing to control Iran's future for its own strategic interests. This was the moment trust was broken. After the coup, Iran entered a new phase under the rule of the Shah. With backing from the United States, the Shah pursued an ambitious modernization program. Economically, there were significant gains. Following the 1973 oil crisis, global oil prices surged dramatically, increasing Iran's revenues. The country experienced rapid industrial growth, infrastructure projects expanded, urbanization accelerated. By some metrics, Iran became one of the fastest growing economies in the world during this period. But beneath that growth, structural problems were developing. Wealth distribution remained highly unequal. Much of the economic benefit was concentrated among elites and those connected to the regime. Rural populations often saw little improvement in living conditions. At the same time, political freedoms were severely limited. Opposition parties were suppressed. Criticism of regime was not tolerated. Central to this system was SAVAK, the Shah's secret police. SAVAK was responsible for surveillance, intelligence gathering, and internal security. It was also associated with widespread reports of human rights abuses, including torture and arbitrary detention. Estimates vary, but thousands of political prisoners were detained over the years. This created a paradox. On one hand, Iran was modernizing rapidly. On the other, it was becoming increasingly authoritarian. And there was a third dimension: cultural tension. The Shah's policies often promoted westernization, changes in dress codes, social norms, and cultural practices. For some segments of society, particularly religious groups, this was seen as an erosion of traditional values. By the late 1970s, three forces were converging: economic inequality, political repression, cultural backlash. Individually, each of these could create instability. Together, they created the conditions for revolution. In 1978, protests began to spread across Iran. What started as localized demonstrations quickly grew into a nationwide movement. Students, workers, intellectuals, and religious groups all participated. Strikes disrupted the economy. Public gatherings became larger and more frequent. At the center of this movement was a figure who had been in exile for years: Ruhollah Khomeini. Khomeini's influence was not based on military power but on ideology. His message resonated across different segments of society because it combined multiple sources of discontent: opposition to authoritarian rule, rejection of foreign influence, defense of cultural and religious identity. By early 1979, the situation had reached a tipping point. The Shah left Iran. The monarchy collapsed, and in its place, a new political system emerged: the Islamic Republic. This was not just a change in leadership, it was a complete transformation of the state. The new system was based on a combination of republic institutions and religious authority. Ultimate power rested with the supreme leader, opposition held by Khomeini. But perhaps the most important change was ideological. The United States, once a key ally, was now framed as an adversary, not just politically but morally and culturally. The phrase Great Satan became a symbol of new perspective. From this point forward, the conflict between the two countries was no longer just about policy, it was about identity. Later in 1979, an event happened that would permanently reshape relations: the Iran hostage crisis. A group of Iranian students stormed the US Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. They would remain in captivity for 444 days. Many Iranians feared that the United States might attempt another coup, similar to 1953. The embassy was seen not just as a diplomatic building, but as a potential center of foreign interference. From the American perspective, however, this was a violation of international law and a direct attack on its sovereignty. The crisis dominated global headlines. For the United States, it was a moment of humiliation. For Iran, it was framed as an act of resistance. Diplomatic relations were severed, economic sanctions were introduced, and from that point on, the relationship moved from hostility to entrenched opposition. After the hostage crisis, direct conflict between the United States and Iran became rare. Instead, the relationship evolved into a form of indirect confrontation, often described as a shadow war. Iran developed a strategy of supporting non-state actors across the Middle East. This included groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, as well as various militias in Iraq and Syria. These groups allowed Iran to project influence without engaging in direct state-to-state warfare. The US, meanwhile, deepened its alliances with regional powers, including Saudi Arabia and Israel, both of which viewed Iran as a strategic threat. This created a network of opposing alliances. Instead of a single battlefield, the conflict spread across multiple regions. Instead of direct confrontation, it operated through middle groups. This type of conflict has several features. It is constant but low intensity. It is difficult to resolve because it involves multiple actors, and it allows both sides to pursue their objectives while avoiding full-scale war. In the early 2000s, the conflict entered a new phase. Concerns began to grow about Iran's nuclear program. The US and its allies argued that Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons capability. Iran maintained that its program was for peaceful purposes such as energy production and medical research. This disagreement led to one of the most complex diplomatic confrontations in modern geopolitics. Economic sanctions became the primary tool of pressure. These sanctions targeted Iran's oil exports, banking system, and access to international markets. The economic impact was significant. Iran's GDP contracted during key periods. Inflation rose sharply. The national currency lost value. At one point, oil exports dropped dramatically due to restrictions. The goal of these measures was to force Iran to limit its nuclear activities. In 2015, a breakthrough occurred, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Under this agreement, Iran agreed to reduce its nuclear activities and allow international inspections in exchange for sanctions relief. For a brief period, tensions decreased, but the agreement was fragile. In 2018, the US left the deal and reimposed sanctions. The cycle of escalation resumed. In January 2020, a major escalation happened. A US drone strike killed Qasem Soleimani, one of Iran's most powerful military figures. Soleimani was a key architect of Iran's regional strategy. His killing marked a shift. For the first time in years, the conflict moved closer to direct confrontation. Iran responded with missile strikes targeting US bases in Iraq. Although a full-scale war was avoided, the risk level increased significantly. The conflict was no longer entirely indirect. This isn't just a conflict between two nations, it's a rivalry built on history that was never forgiven, power that was never balanced, and mistrust that only grew deeper with time. And until that cycle is broken, it won't end, it will only evolve.